Sappho was born around 630 BCE on the island of Lesbos. She ran a school for young women, a community studying poetry, music, and dance, and she fell in love with them openly and shamelessly. She wrote about it in language so precise it still stops the breath 2,600 years later. She wrote, "He seems to me equal to the gods, that man who sits across from you. He listens to your sweet voice and lovely laughter, and my heart pounds in my chest. When I look at you, I cannot speak. My tongue breaks, a thin flame runs under my skin. That is not friendship, that has never been friendship." For 6 centuries, Sappho was celebrated, her poetry studied, performed, and passed down. 9 volumes of her work survived the fall of empires. Then, Christianity became the state religion of Rome. The church fathers read Sappho and understood exactly what her poems described. They decided that this could not be allowed to exist. Orders were given: find the poems, destroy them. In 391, the Library of Alexandria burned. In 1073, Pope Gregory VII ordered another bonfire with Sappho among the fuel. It worked. 9 volumes became 8, then 5, then 1, then nothing. By the Middle Ages, Sappho existed only as a name, a rumor, a warning. And then something extraordinary happened. In the late 19th century, archaeologists at Oxyrhynchus began finding papyrus scraps. The dry Egyptian climate preserved fragments that were lost everywhere else. Some scraps wrapped mummies, some were in ancient garbage dumps, and among them Sappho. Not 9 volumes, not even 9 complete poems, but fragments, half a stanza here, 3 words there. Slowly, painstakingly, archaeologists and classicists pieced her back together. We still have 1 complete poem and a collection of broken pieces. They burned her work, erased her name, and rewrote her as heterosexual for centuries. And still, she is the reason we have the words lesbian and sapphic. She is the reason millions of women have been able to name themselves. They could not kill her. They could only delay her.
In 1778, 2 women ran away together. Eleanor Butler was 39 and came from a wealthy Irish family. She had spent years refusing a string of arranged marriages. Sarah Ponson was 23 and an orphan living with unkind relatives. The 2 women met, became inseparable, and decided to leave everything behind. Their families chased them, caught them, and Eleanor was locked in her room. Eleanor escaped through the window and they tried again. This time they made it across the sea to Wales and bought a small cottage called Plasnewid. They renovated the cottage and planted gardens together. They filled the house with books, art, and curious visitors. For 50 years, they never spent a night apart. Word spread, and they became known as the Ladies of Llangollen. Writers and notable figures visited and praised them. Many recognized them as a couple and spoke openly about their relationship. Eleanor died in 1829, and Sarah followed 2 years later, heartbroken. After their deaths, historians began to erase the nature of their relationship. For the next century and a half, historians called them romantic friends. The phrase acknowledged devotion while denying any suggestion of a romantic or sexual bond. This linguistic trick let historians appear honest while erasing the meaning of their lives. Plasnewid now stands as a museum, and their shared bedroom contains a single bed. They could not have been clearer, but history chose to look away.
Juana Inés de Aspaye was born in 1648 in what is now Mexico. By the age of 3, she had taught herself to read. By 8, she had written her first poem. By 13, she was fluent in Latin after teaching herself in 20 lessons. She was by any measure a genius. Genius in a woman in the 17th century colonial world was a problem. As a teenager, she was brought to the viceroy court, where her intelligence became a kind of party trick. She could answer any question, debate scholars, and write poetry that made men weep. The court was not safe for her, and she understood that. A brilliant, unmarried woman with no family fortune had exactly one option. At 21, she entered a convent, not from religious calling, but because it was the only place she could think. As Sor Juana, she built one of the largest private libraries in the Americas. She collected scientific instruments, wrote plays, debated theology, and composed celebrated poems. Among her poems were love poems addressed to women. The most famous poems spoke to a woman she called Lisi, likely the viceroy wife Maria Luisa Manrique de Lara. The poems are not coded or ambiguous, they are passionate love poetry. The church tolerated her because she made New Spain look sophisticated and because her poetry was magnificent. But love poems to women and her challenges to doctrine became too much for church authorities. A bishop posing as a fellow nun wrote telling her to stop writing, studying, and thinking, and to devote herself to prayer. She replied with the respuesta, a sor filote, defending every woman as right to education and intellectual life. She was fearless in defense of a woman-s mind. Then, the pressure became unbearable, and they forced her to sell her library and instruments. She was made to sign a document renouncing her intellectual life, reportedly written in her own blood. She died 2 years later, nursing plague victims in the convent at age 46. For 300 years, scholars debated whether she was a lesbian and called her poems mere literary exercises. Here's what we know: she wrote love poetry to women, so powerful it still burns 4 centuries later, and the church silenced her for it. Historians spent centuries trying to convince you it never happened, but you get to decide who you believe.
I could keep going. I could tell you about Begum Samru, the 18th century Indian ruler who commanded her own army and built a palace. She spent her life with a woman named Farzana, a woman later historians reduced to her servant. I could tell you about Anne Lister, the 19th century English landowner who wrote her diaries in code. Millions of words describing her relationships with women in explicit detail. Her family hid the diaries behind a wall panel for over 100 years after her death. I could tell you about the women of the Harlem Renaissance who sang about loving women to packed clubs. Later writers scrubbed their biographies clean. About the Chinese Golden Orchid Societies, where women married each other in formal ceremonies in the 19th century. Historians treated it as a footnote, a curiosity, not real marriage. I could tell you about Eleanor Roosevelt and Lorena Hickok, whose letters to each other were full of longing. Their families and publishers spent decades hiding the full extent of their relationship behind the word friendship. The list is not short. The list was never short. What was short has always been our willingness to look at it honestly. These women did not hide. Not most of them. Not in their lifetimes. Sappho published her poems. The Ladies of Llangollen welcomed visitors to their home for 50 years. Sor Juana wrote and published her love poems. Anne Lister walked through town with her arm around her wife and dared anyone to say a word. They lived out loud in centuries far more dangerous than ours. The erasure came after. It came from the men who burned the scrolls, the scholars who changed the pronouns, the families who hid the diaries, and now it falls to us to dig up the fragments and read between the lines, to say the words they were not allowed to say, or that were said and then crossed out. Every time you learn one of these names, you are undoing the erasure. Every time you share one of these stories, you are doing the work of recovery. They tried to erase these women. They failed, because we are still here, and we are still telling their stories.